Christian fiction lovers, welcome to another video. If you've been tracking my posting schedule, I know I have been terribly off, but I have been traveling. You'll see this video and then hopefully one more in this setup, and then we'll be back to normal for a little while. It was too dark in my last video and I forgot to address it, but I did get my hair done. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but it happened. So today's video, I am going to be sharing with you some specific books for specific life struggles. One of the reasons I love reading so incredibly much is because oftentimes I feel like God has put specific books in my life to encourage me through like that part of life. I have hit like a really bad reading slump the past couple of weeks, where I'll read one good book and then not have any motivation to read. I'll like drag myself through a book and then I'll have another good book. And I've just felt like the really good books that God has put in my life to like speak to me through them, because they've been really impacting for me. And that has happened plenty of times in the past like 2 years, I guess. And I thought I would share some of them with you, because sometimes knowing how a book might help you going into it is a little comforting almost, and you can pick it up if you're struggling with something like that. I have a list on my phone. This is pretty much through memory recall of trying to remember what I do have on my shelves. I could do a better video. I probably will do a more updated version of this kind of video more in the future. I think the first books that I would recommend are Rooms by James L. Rubart and The Shack by William Paul Young. These books are, I would recommend these if you are like brand new to faith, or brand new to faith, and if you are struggling in your new faith and you just need answers about a lot of things that sometimes the church doesn't have good answers on because they're so far, not ahead, but most people in church leadership are not brand new Christians. And I think sometimes they can forget what it's like to have all of those little questions that are actually a really big deal. And these books answered so many questions for me that I didn't even know I had. And I feel like a lot of new Christians, especially if you came into your faith after really struggling, which thankfully is not my story. But I know some people who come into faith after having, like, through traumatic experiences. You have a lot of questions that you could either be scared to ask, or you're just not even aware that you need it answered, and that was me. And both of these books really helped me. I read them because they're popular, not because I knew that was their message. But yeah, so Rooms and The Shack, I feel like they fit hand in hand. They're kind of the same genre. The next book I would recommend, I could recommend so many more if I could actually look at my shelves for this topic. But if you are struggling with doubt or guilt or uncertainty over a decision, I would recommend The Atonement Child, because it's going to be so incredibly validating for whatever really hard decision that you are doubting. It could be doubt in yourself, because the main character in that book doubts herself a lot, as well as those around her are uncertain how to help her. This book does deal specifically with abortion and what do you do when you're a Christian but you are pregnant from unfortunate circumstances. Within that struggle that the main character is dealing with, you learn a lot about guilt and uncertainty and questioning yourself. So yeah, that's the book I would recommend for that. I'm sure I have others, they're just not coming to my mind right now. Francine Rivers, she has quite a few books. She wrote The Atonement Child. She has quite a few books that deal with like just figuring out yourself. The next book I would recommend, and my subscribers are probably gonna reach through this camera and punch me eventually, but because I talk about this book way too much, but if you are struggling with walking with someone who is having bad mental health problems, I would recommend Under the Magnolias. It is my comfort book. I love that book so much. I read it this summer. I want to read it again because it is all about a teenage girl whose father has bipolar depression, and she basically ends up taking care of him after her mother dies. She ends up taking care of him and all of her siblings from the time she is like 13 to her adulthood. until they realize what is wrong with her father. She's the oldest. She basically mothers all of her siblings, but it is so on point when it comes to talking about the inner struggles of someone who is helping another person through mental health issues, and how dark and lonely it can be. Like, that's a very personal thing for me, and that book 100% met me right where I was, just validated me, and I loved it so much. Next, I would recommend, so this is if you are struggling to like find your own identity or like come into who you are in Christ without the influence of other people. I would recommend The Price of Privilege Trilogy and Grace in Thine Eyes. So The Price of Privilege Trilogy is kind of like a suspense series. Excuse me. I have a whole video on that I will link talking more about it, but the main character in this book, Julia, she ends up finding herself, like finding her identity in Christ after she is able to separate herself from all the other people around her. And I feel like that is such an important message, that you cannot be who you truly are in Christ with other people forming your identity. Like, I think that makes sense. And I thought that was such a powerful message, and the story is also just chef's kiss. Beautiful. Grace in Thine Eyes is kind of the same thing. This girl, the main character, has to figure out who she is after a traumatic thing happens to her while she is on a trip away from her family. This is historical fiction, and it is set in Scotland. The story was interesting, but I gave it 5 stars because I thought the message was so beautiful, and the main character held herself with such grace the entire time, found herself through what happened to her, and I loved that. Okay, next I'm going to recommend another book by T.I. Lowe, who wrote Under the Magnolias. I'm going to recommend Lulu's Cafe, which I just finished last night, actually. This book I would recommend to someone who has survived abuse, is surviving abuse. It is extremely triggering. It wasn't for me because I have pretty low, like not much is on my trigger list. It's pretty dark at times. She goes through a lot. I think I'll put a trigger list in the description in case you guys want to go read it. T.I. Lowe is becoming a new favorite author for me. I want to get some more of her books because the 2 that I've read now have both been 5 stars and incredibly impacting to me. But Lulu's Cafe, I'm looking at it right now. Lulu's Cafe was just so breathtakingly beautiful, and I think depicted the inner struggle of the main character, Leah, so well. And this book also made me believe in true love after what happened to the main character. Like, the way she finds love again, and the guy that ends up falling in love with her, just, oh my gosh, it was the sweetest thing ever. I want to do a full review on this book, but I have to figure out like what I would title the video because I'm not sure. Finally, I'm going to recommend 3 books under the same struggle, and the struggle would be standing up for and fighting for what you believe, which as Christians we are constantly doing. But the 3 books I would recommend for this is The White Rose Resists, The Paris Dressmaker, and When Twilight Breaks. Yes, these are all World War II books, but I find that World War books, when they're about resistance efforts against the Nazis, against the evil of the Holocaust, like those characters will like literally be put to death for what they believe in and what they're fighting for. And I think because of that setting of a world war, it allows for that message to be put forth so beautifully, and that's one of the reasons I love that genre so incredibly much. That's just kind of a short list of like the struggles I could think of and the books that went along with them. If there are specific struggles or books, but I guess more like specific struggles that you would like me to recommend certain books for, leave it in the comments and I would love to do that. I would say that I read some books that deal with some pretty tough stuff, and that is a personal choice because I like to let the books I read teach me how to handle life instead of just let it be an escape from life. That is all I have for you today. I thought this was a fun concept. We'll see how it does. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you in my next video, whatever that is. Until then, bye!